Let's get, we're going to get this party started here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of HR at the Table. I'm Liv Carter. I'm your host for today's HR at the Table interview. For those of you that don't know, maybe it's your first HR at the Table event. We're so glad you're here. Let me start by saying that, but let me give you the lowdown a little bit on what HR at the Table is about. This is a educational thought leadership event where we bring HR, talent acquisition, people leaders to the table, virtual table, and we interview them. So we pick a variety of topics. Today's I'm very excited about. So I'm sure you are too if you registered. And we have a guest speaker today as well, who I'm going to introduce in just a little bit. Before we get going, though, just a few housekeeping items. I get this question all the time, so I like to put it out there in the beginning, and I'll remind, in the chat and later on, but we are recording today's event. So HR at the Table episodes are always recorded, so you can watch those on demand. You can share them with a colleague and take notes. I know I like to listen back because I'm hosting, so I can't take notes. So all of them are recorded and are available on verifiedfirst.com, HR at the Table. So you can go to the menu, resources, and then HR at the Table. Everything's there. Along with the recordings, we also offer SHRM and HRCI credit for every HR at the Table, including this one. So at the end of today's event, we'll have the activity codes for you to redeem your SHRM credit, your HRCI credit. If you're watching on demand, you'll get those again at the end, but you can always reach out to us for questions. And then again, those recordings or on-demand episodes also have SHRM and HRCI credit. So it's a nice little value add. Lastly, before I introduce our topic and our amazing speaker who's being so patient as I go through housekeeping items, we encourage you to ask questions. I've met with our speaker a couple times and we've got questions to ask her, but we really want this to be a value add to you all in the audience. This is your first HR at the Table, make the most of it. If it's your second, your third, maybe you've been with us since season 1, keep asking questions. We welcome those and we'll keep an eye on those and try to ask as many as we can throughout today's event. So I know that was a lot, but I want to give us plenty of time to jump into today's topic, which is the truth about recruitment, hot takes for the bold innovator. I am super excited about this conversation that we're having today in this episode. We have an amazing sponsor, a partner of ours, Lever, sponsoring today's episode. Thank you, Lever, for sponsoring. And there will be more information about them post-event as well. But let's get to the truth about recruitment, hot takes. I'm going to introduce our speaker here. We've got Cassidy Gonzalez. Cassidy, I would love it if before we get into our interview, if you could just share a little bit about yourself, what you're passionate about, and all of that fun stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This is so fun to be here. Liv, I feel like we've only chatted twice, but you're already my best friend. So this will be such a fun chat. I've been in HR for nearly 15 years, spent my whole career in the space, and I love people. I love getting to work with people. I usually specialize in startups. I have been at bigger companies like Google and SanDisk, but I really gravitate towards more startups where I can just build. I love building, which is why I'm so passionate about recruiting, because that is building, right? You are building a company full of people to do what your company does. And sourcing great talent and hiring great talent is crucial. So I have a lot of hot takes about this topic, and I can't wait to dive into them.
Awesome. And I am excited as well. And Cassie, it's mutual. We're besties. It's something HR at the Table just brings people together,
I love it. I love it. So fun.
Now, before we get into our first question and topic, I'm going to launch a poll question. I think we need a little bit of an icebreaker here. So for those of you that have attended an HR at the Table, welcome back. It's great to have you. For those of you that haven't, this is a poll question that we ask in every HR at the Table episode. And it's really for us to get a pulse on where our community is at when it comes to HR and TA technology. So I'm just going to leave that there for a second, and would love responses. We collect all these responses and we put them in a guide, so stay tuned for that as well. Cassie, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. If you had to kind of guess what area of technology, so we've got recruitment software, we've got ATSs, background screening, HRS, and payroll. Where do you think people are reconsidering or reviewing their technology most?
I would say they're reviewing anywhere where AI is become very prominent, which right now that leads me towards recruiting because it's such a
Mm.
place that AI I think can come into play. So my
Yeah,
would say like more like an ATS, but
yeah.
really that's what people right now as we're looking at HR tech is who's adopting AI quickest to make sure that we can be up to speed on the latest technology. That's my guess.
That's a very great guess because you're right. 39% are ATS changes. So thank you to everyone for filling that out. And it sounds like Cassie, we might have to have you back for a webinar and AI, but we can talk about that a
The
little bit later.
expert, but I am so interested. So I'd be happy to chat all of my opinions.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, with that, let's jump into it and let's talk about a new generation of talent. So, I have been waiting to have you on this episode, and we're so glad you're here. Can you share a little bit about what this topic means to you when it comes to hot takes and revisiting talent?
Yeah, we have like such a dynamic workforce. It's changing constantly, and we have these new generations coming into the talent, to the workforce. And I'm not sure if our recruitment processes are adapting and changing as quickly as our workforce is adapting and changing. So that's why I really care about it a lot. I'm like, are we actually listening to our customers, which is our candidate pool as recruiters, to make sure that we are adapting to their needs as it changes and as the workforce changes?
Right, right. So navigating those changes, and I love how you said candidates as your customers, in that world of stakeholders that a business or company may have. Obviously, we've had a significant shift in the workforce in terms of younger generations, newer generations entering the job market. How would you describe the current state of the workforce? What are some trends or shifts that you've observed?
Yeah, I think that we have mostly millennials right now that are really dominating the workforce. They've entered that, they are becoming the management of this workforce. And the millennials brought in the adoption of technology. Like everyone wants, like we mentioned, the AI, the hot tech. This is what people expect, is they expect technology. They were really focused on this work-life balance. After COVID, everyone has a really deep focus on how they can prioritize this balance in life. And they also really want to see like a culture that is about purpose. They want to go to work knowing they're having an impact. And we see that in millennials, and we see it only becoming even increasingly more that way with Gen Z. And I predict the Generation Alpha will just expect it from day one. They're not going to have to go look for it. They're going to expect that every company is going to do those things. So I think that we really need to be on that forefront of technology and really making sure that we're telling the right stories to our candidates to have it meet what they want, what their expectations are going to be.
Right. Yeah. And for our audience, you may be thinking, okay, we know what the workforce is about today. And I'll just say we're laying the land a little bit before we get into the hot takes. Hot, not spicy, as Cassie mentioned earlier.
It's spicy, just a little hot
Yeah,
take.
just the hot takes. But kind of understanding where we're at. And Cassie, what I heard you mentioned when it comes to expectations, technology, and then you mentioned purpose. Could you share a little bit more about what you've seen in terms of, whether it's tr key traits or values or characteristics that this generation has expectation wise on a potential employer or work environment?
Yeah, I think especially when we look at this generation, they are open to also being in a part of a gig economy. So
Mm.
they don't need to dedicate their whole career to one company. They can be like, you know what? I'm going to go to the companies that have what I think is important in the world so I can feel like I made an impact. And if that is not one company, they're open to doing it to multiple. So the flexibility of jobs, I think, is going to be more crucial. And just knowing that people want purpose. How is your company actually providing purpose to the world? We call that on the HR side, we call that your employer value proposition. What value are you bringing to your employees? So the nickname is EVP. And you should really have your EVP dialed, and it should be blasted on your website. It's part of your employer branding to really help in that recruitment process. So you're not having to go find these pockets of people. You're attracting them to you based on what you can offer to them and what you offer to the world. So I think there should be a little more time focused on that EVP where you can just really nail that story. I think the candidates will appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And I love an acronym,
I love
EVP.
an acronym. I have an acronym I want to share later. It's called our Create framework. I'm addicted to it. So we'll talk later about that. But I love acronyms.
Yeah. Love it. Well, we'll get to that later. It's something to hold on to, audience. So stay tuned there. Um, so Cassie, you mentioned the EVP and really dialing in on that. Are there any other shifts that are influencing recruitment practices or strategies?
Yeah, that's actually what I think the problem is. I don't think that we are shifting as much as we need to be. Like the market's shifted, and I think recruiters are still using all their basic ways of recruiting, and they're not actually shifting to make it be aligned with the market dictates. I think we should be more data driven, and I don't know if we are enough. I think we should also focus more on a candidate. The employee experience is really crucial right now, and are our practices and processes mirroring that? I'm not sure. I think we have some work to do.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I know there's always work to be done. So I know we're going to talk a little bit and try to bring things to practical steps as much as possible. But we do have a question in the chat that I'm going to just bring up real quick. Patty shared, if you want to appeal to various generations, would you list more than one EVP?
Oh, I love that question. I actually, and her little follow-up too, I just see that. And how would you do that without seeming to be too scatterbrained? That's my exact thought, is I don't think you should have more than one. I think you
Yeah.
should work with probably your marketing team that they have like these experts that can wordsmith, but say, okay, we have these three value props to hit these three different generations. How can we tie this all into one succinct value prop that would hit all those things? I think that's possible. So it might not be as specific and pointed, but I think you could draft an EVP that could hit all of the areas you want that can then different generations could lean into different things about your EVP and appeal to them. So that would be my suggestion. But also, I mean, hey, A/B test it. Post an EVP that's, hey, if you are this generation, you might love this about us. If you're this generation, you might love this about us. Test it, see how it works.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we could have a webinar on that alone, right? And digging in a little bit further on
That's so
EVP,
true.
but
We probably
yeah,
could.
just
That's
add
awesome.
it to the list, I guess. No, but great question, Patty. Thank you for submitting that. And that kind of brings me up to my follow-up question here is, you mentioned even aligning with marketing, but how has the role of the recruiter evolved over the years, given the shifts and trends we've seen?
Yeah, I think the role of the recruiter has actually become inundated because there's just so much to now sort through. There's a lot of jobs to fill, there's a lot of labor shortages, there's a lot of skill gaps, and also the recruiter's tasked with navigating this environment that they don't have the time to actually focus on candidate experience. They don't have the time to do these things to level themselves up and to be that recruiter that needs to adapt to these generations because they're just so bogged down. So that's actually why I'm really excited about all the new HR tech. I think that AI will have a crucial aspect in recruiting to then automate so many things that the recruiters can then put more of that human emphasis back to where it needs to be. So that's what I'm excited about. That those traditional recruitment methods can start to evolve because we can offload so much of that work to AI. I think recruiters are getting really burned out because there's just a lot to
Mm,
do, and I feel for them. But I still want to focus. That's where my hot takes are going to come in. Focus on
yeah.
the right things where they can make the most impact.
Yeah. And I'm assuming, kind of going back to your previous statement on what your customers or candidates want, or expect, I should say, technology, right? So leveraging that as a recruiter, I'm assuming that would resonate pretty well with your potential
Oh,
customer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Picture your millennial generation. I mean, they're going to get a text message, and that's great. They're like, oh, cool, my recruiter texted me. You're
Yeah.
Gen Alpha, so skip over Gen Z, go to Gen Alpha. That's going to be the only way they do it. Like, or even later technology than that, they might be using different methods, but they're not going to expect to have to submit a resume anymore, in my predictions. Like, I think
Mm,
it'll become very tech heavy, and you're not going to have your old, like, apply to this, applicant tracking system and this ATS, like, source on the web. Like, I think it'll just be more intuitive. AI will come out and find your profiles, and you'll get messages, text messages through an AI bot that will funnel you to the right people. Like, I just see a very advanced world that these generations will innately embrace because that's what they've grown
mm.
up in.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a perfect kind of segue for us to start talking about some hot takes.
Yeah, let's talk
Uh,
about what's broken in recruiting.
right. Um, so I want to jump in and I may have, oh, hold on. There we go. So we kind of talked about some of the challenges at the moment, and I want to jump to recruitment hot takes. So, Cassie, you and I have had a couple conversations on this, and I know we're gonna dive into what those are, but just we've got three major ones for our audience. So recruiters are just matchmakers and seat fillers. Okay, I'm gonna let that sit for a second. That's
Get
one
the
hot
get the spice level. There's a little bit of
right,
spice.
right, just a little bit.
Seat filler.
Um, hot take number two, recruiters are a dime a dozen and easy to ignore. Okay. And then number three, recruiting teams aren't strategic partners. So we're going to dive into each of these, but I kind of want to start and just get your general thoughts on um, why do you think some of these outdated beliefs or misconceptions about recruitment have, managed to stick around for so long?
Yeah, these misconceptions come about because there's some reality behind it. I think there are companies where they might have a recruiter that is actually just a seat filler, and that's not
Mm,
the way that recruiters should operate, which is what I want to chat about. But like, I think that's where misconceptions come from, is that it's happening in a pocket and it becomes mainstream, and then that's where it becomes harmful, right? To blanket state that recruiters are X, Y, and Z, in a negative way, like, oh, they just fill vacancies, that's all they're good for. It can be harmful. So that's where I think it stems from, but also because people are resistant to change. That's just natural human nature. If you get a recruiter that's been trained by their recruiting manager that they had, and that recruiting manager was trained by their recruiting manager, obviously they're only passing on what they know and what they've learned. And so if we can get better recruiters to actually recruit and be strategic partners, we can change that cycle and have the majority be really great recruiters, which really, actually, I think majority recruiters are this way, but there's still some pockets that exist that they could level up their recruiting. So that's what I want to get into. So that's why my first hot take was that they're just seat fillers. Like, they just are there to fill vacant seats.
yeah, yeah, and I'm excited. So I want to dive into that a little bit further and start maybe high level, like what qualities and skills make a good recruiter in today's landscape, would you say?
Yeah, so if you're going to be the recruiter that's not just going to be like, I'm just going to be reactive and filling seats, the first thing that I would say is that a great recruiter is building very long-term pipelines. So they have a long-term game plan. Obviously, they've got their list of roles they're probably sourcing right at this moment, but they're working close with the business to know what's coming down the pipeline. And they're talking to candidates all the time. They're networking all the time to really grow that bench with like a 5, 10 year game plan in mind. I'm not kidding you. I've met a recruiter that is stellar, and he had candidates. He's like, in 10 years, this person is going to be at the company I work for, because he's just could see the
Wow.
long-term play. And he's nurturing that relationship for those 10 years so that when wherever he's at, whether it's the company he's at now or the company he would be at in the future, he knew that candidate was going to be great and nurtured it for the long game. That's a killer recruiter. So that's the
Yeah.
first technique that I would suggest, is like thinking that really long-term play, always networking, always making sure you're keeping the long-term game in mind. The second is the candidate experience with that. So if you look at that recruiter that was keeping that long-term play, he's not going to go talk to somebody and try to sell them on a role right away. He's just going to make sure that that candidate's having a great experience, no matter what the process is. And so that they always know that their company's recruiting for, they can trust this recruiter, and he's building that really great experience for them. And then on the short run, candidates are also, if you have a role right now that you're in the middle of an interview process for, they should be just treated with like the utmost time and attention. Like, the fact that we still have ghosting happening, I'm on a crusade. Ghosting needs to stop. There's no reason to have it. Set your automated tools so we can communicate with candidates in a way that feels human and is respectful of like where they're at in the process, but really just create an experience that no matter the outcome for the candidate, they feel like so great to have worked with you. That's what recruiters really, I think, can focus on. And the last little tip I'll share here to build really great recruiters is to work on their storytelling. Um, we don't like I think employees, millennials, whether you're Gen Z, Gen Alpha, you can look up the job description. You can look up online and see a ton of their employer brand, right? You can see all this data. And when you get on a call with a recruiter and they just regurgitate all of the data, that's not helpful. So if you get a recruiter that can
Mm,
actually paint the picture of all these data points, because you know that they Googled you. Like a candidate these days
right.
will come in and they'll have Googled you, they'll have Glassdoor viewed you, they'll have LinkedIn stalked you, they will check all of their tech tools because that's how techy they are. And for the recruiter then to be able to paint a beautiful picture is really a skill that I think recruiters could emphasize so that they become really great recruiters versus just an average recruiter.
Right, right. It's almost like I was thinking of like the reverse when I'm hiring and interviewing, I see your resume, I want to hear in between the lines. And that's I think what you're getting at. Candidates, they have the knowledge. They see everything on the internet. They might have a friend or a colleague, right, that has
Right.
insight too, and kind of
And
have to
they've
be aware of
done all
that.
that back channeling.
Right,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
right.
It can be so powerful. Like a storytelling that sounds like such a I mean, I almost like go to marketing. That's like a marketing skill set, but like
Yeah.
really, recruiters have the marketing skill set. They have the sales skill set. They have all these skill sets, and they should lean heavy into those because that's what we want. We don't want just people to be a point person, which is what recruiting often becomes. I want need to fill a seat. I'm going to talk to this person, get them to these people, and they just are operations. When really they should be more of that storytelling, that salesmanship, that making that candidate so hyped on your company and all other candidates that don't get the role still hyped on your company because they had such a great experience with you.
Yeah. So I have a question on that. Recruiters and storytelling, how do you build like the business case for that? Like, hey, we're gonna pivot to a different way of recruitment or our approach to candidates. Any thoughts on like, especially if I know in our audience we've got a wide range of talent acquisition professionals and teams, sizes of companies. I'm just curious, any thoughts on where someone in our audience could start with that?
Yeah, my favorite way to start, which is similar to the question we asked from Patty, is A/B test it. Like just be like, okay, with my own TA, my if I take my talent team, let's try these new ways to communicate and let's do like a candidate survey after and see how our candidates are different. And then you have a really great business case that we're going to go full adoption on this because we saw the changes of how quickly we could hire or how much more employer referrals we got or whatever it might have been that you're testing. But that's my favorite way to try new things because it can feel scary to be like, let's not do this as part of our process and let's do this instead. It's easier to be like, let's just try it out. Let's just see if it works for a
Yeah.
minute. But I think it's
Okay.
really also all important too that recruiters can feel confident to challenge their assumptions of a hiring manager. That they can go
Mm.
to the hiring manager and say, hey, I know that you have this list of requirements, but I want to actually help you make this the best possible position to fill and not be scared. Just be like, okay, I got my to-do list. I'm going to go do it. That's a seat filler, right? Like if they're getting their intake meeting, list of requirements, I go fill it, match it up, and yeah, it works. Like obviously it works. We've been doing it that way for years. But what if the recruiter instead is like so ingrained in this team that they can push back on the hiring manager and say, hey, we thought about this, or can I bring you a candidate that fits this but also has this added to it? And just be a little more involved in that process. I think you'll see a lot of awesome results from it.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that advice and A/B testing. I don't think we do that enough in
We don't
general.
do it near enough.
Yes,
Everything,
yeah.
I mean, we're not doing heart surgery here. We're not having to, save a life. We can test something out. If it doesn't work, let's bag it and move on and try again.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cassidy, before we move on to our next hot take, we have a couple questions. So I wanna dedicate some time to read these real quick. So Melissa here was wondering, do you have any advice for an HR team of one without an ATS? trying to sift through hundreds of applications on the mainstream hiring sites.
Oh,
Currently
me too.
shopping, recruiting, and onboarding CRM options, but won't have one in place until Q2 2025. Any tips for streamlining
Yes.
and staying organized?
It's so hard. I've been in your shoes. The first is to if there's any way you're gathering them, like there's no ATS. So if you're sorting through on job sites and collecting resumes, create a spreadsheet. You've got to organize them somewhere. So create your own CRM, your own ATS. It's not fun, but you've got to do it. And then don't feel obligated to have to look at every candidate to make a good candidate experience. You can look for those quick things that are not going to be a fit. Like, for instance, we're located in Utah, and right now we're not hiring any remote employees. So it's quick for me to just go through my list and note if they're not in Utah and send them a really kind message that says, hey, right now we're only applying in Utah. Here's my nice note, send them on their way. But some, I think recruiters feel overwhelmed because they're looking at so many, and it's like just find the one knockout and get through them. My other advice is just get that ATS as soon as you can. There's some really great frugal options that can remove so much of this work and have those knockout questions built into the system. My other thing I'll just say is HR team of one deserves all the medals. So sending you love.
It's super, super great advice and great question. Because again, I know everyone in the audience is in different on different journeys and different paths when it comes to HR and TA. So one more question, then we'll move to our next hot take here. Virginia was wondering, what insights and recommendations do you have to promote well-being and work-life balance in the recruitment process? So I think going back to what your customer, your candidate wants, and incorporating that into your EVP. Any thoughts on that, Cassidy?
Yeah, one thing that just comes to mind quickly is when you do an outreach to that candidate to bring in, you could even just mention it right there in that outreach message. We prioritize your employee well-being, and we think that we're like work-life balance is important. Please pick a time that works for you and your external life outside of work. Because I know that when you look at a candidate, if they're currently employed, they're trying to balance their current job, they're balancing their family life, their home life, they're balancing trying to get these interviews in. They're probably feeling strapped to be like, okay, where am I going to make this work? And just by sharing that we know that you're busy and we also want you to prioritize your well-being, make sure this is convenient for them, signals to them right there in the interview process, oh, this company cares, and they'll continue this behavior when I get there. So it's a simple wording. You're not really changing anything. You're just telling them up front, this is how we operate, so act in this way when you come in. I think little things like that that can send signals about your culture are really crucial.
Love that. Yeah, really great question, Virginia, and thank you, Cassidy, for the insight. So, hot take number two, recruiters are a dime a dozen and easy to ignore. So, I
Like
wish
go
we
up
had
in
like a
spice level. They kind of
I
do.
know, I'm like,
Like
are we
go
increasing
spicier.
here? Would have been a great another poll question, right? How spicy are we getting over here?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, no, hot take number two. We have one more after this, but I know in previous conversations, Cassie, you mentioned 80% of candidates want to hear directly from hiring managers. Um, why is this the case? And what does it mean, for the way a recruiter may engage with candidates today?
Yeah, when I came across the stat, honestly, I was like, whoa, that's like surprising to me. Because I think people are normally accustomed to hear from recruiters, but to hear that it actually would love to hear from someone that's not the recruiter, it like,
Right.
piqued my interest. But I think when I think of the reason why that is, I think it's because they want to know what their day-to-day work will be like. That's why they're going to take this job, right? Of course, they're going to want to know compensation. They're going to want to know your perks and benefits. They're going to want to know the purpose of the company. But really, they're wondering what is their day-to-day they're walking in going to be like? And the person they're going to interact with the most will be their manager and their team members directly. They'll have other interactions, of course, but those will be the most prominent. So if you're thinking about somebody looking for that answer, you can see why they'd rather hear straight from the hiring manager versus the recruiter, because I think that's what they're really after. So
Hmm.
it's like an interesting take because then it's like, well, why don't we just have hiring managers reach out? And I'm like, well, why don't you? Let's do that. As a recruiter, maybe your job can have the intake meeting, get all the information you need from the hiring manager. You're collaborating with them to help them see kind of the bigger picture. And then you help them draft up their own messaging that they could get on LinkedIn and send it straight from them. You're doing all the legwork for them as a recruiter, but you can help them be the one to reach out and really get that attention from candidates because they feel like they're being told not just a pretty picture. Because, like we said, the recruiter should be able to tell the pretty picture, but you also need someone that is going to show them their day to day. So I thought it was a super, super
Yeah.
interesting data point, but an easy thing to just make it happen. Like, if that's what they
Right.
want, let's give them what they want, and we'll do the legwork, empower our hiring managers, and get them out there and help them build their team directly.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because I hadn't put it together, but I get the first question I get asked from a candidate is, what does the day-to-day look like? Right.
Right? It's the first
Uh,
thing. When
yeah.
you it all boils down, what is it like a day in and day out? Because that will get repeated. And is that what they're after? So I
Right.
think it just cuts right through that noise of like, here's all the great things, which is great. I mean, it's a good noise. It's not bad noise, but it just can attach someone so much quicker to your company if they get right to that point versus I got to go sort through all these things. You could lose them in that process if they're not very efficient. And you can cut through that if that's what they want anyways, is to hear directly from a hiring manager.
Right. Yeah. So I want to dig into that a little bit more and kind of talk about some of the risks maybe involved with that. But Daniel submitted a question here, which I think aligns with kind of the direction we're going. But Daniel put in here, any advice to keep hiring managers engaged? For example, I have candidates who I have sourced and hiring managers do not meet with them until a month later.
Oh no.
I know constant follow-up sometimes do not work. So if the recruiter is, leveraging the hiring manager in that like, I'll just stop there. Thoughts, Cassidy.
Yes, I've got so many thoughts because I've been in these shoes before. So my first thing that I actually do with these hiring managers, if a hiring manager comes to me and is not prioritizing time with candidates, clearly they don't need the role right then. If they need the role right then, they will make it a top priority. So I just
Hmm.
push it back on them. If this is not a top priority for you, it's not a top priority for me. Come to me when it's a top priority because you probably have way more roles to fill. If you don't, like that's great. We can work on other strategies, but that's the first thing is the level set priority. They probably are feeling like they really, really need this person because obviously they don't have time for anything else. But if that's the truth, then they should be making time for it to get that person in. So that's my tip there is just level set in a very kind, direct way, right? But that's where I would get to there. The same level of prioritization from both parties will help tremendously. And then the next thing is just to remember that they're human too, and they will balance a lot of things. So those reminders are very appreciated, and it's great to have those connection points. I'd also recommend just setting a weekly cadence. If we don't want this to go a month out, you're going to have a weekly check-in with this hiring manager on this rec until this rec is filled, and they just know it's a standing meeting. You do not miss. It's 3 minutes, and we'll connect on the dots just to keep things moving. Sometimes just people need a concrete something to keep them accountable. So
Yeah.
hopefully those two tips help, but man, it is not for the faint of heart trying to wrangle hiring managers, which is why they should be more involved anyways, so that they can feel this pain and not be passing it on to recruiters.
Yeah, yeah. Really great question, and I think really valuable insight, Cassidy, there. I know I'm guilty, my TA team has come after me. So I apologize for the record. It's recorded. I'll send this to them later today.
So sorry. We all do
Yeah,
it. But it really, if you think back, Liv, like that is where you're like, oh, my priorities might have actually not been aligned. I did have a higher priority item. So let's just bounce this for 2 weeks and then we'll pick it back up. And then if the
right,
recruiters are clear on that, they can clearly communicate that to candidates in the pipeline so we don't ruin the candidate experience. Because that's actually what's happening. They're being delayed
right.
and this recruiter's messaging to the candidate like, oh, I'm trying to get to this and just tarnishes everything. So clear communication will help in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one risk, right? You're spinning your wheels to fill this position and the hiring manager is not engaged or slow to respond. What are some other risks of, recruiters, I'll say, being seen if we relied more on hiring managers, are there some risks of recruiters being seen as dispensable or interchangeable in the hiring process?
Yes, which I don't think is a bad thing. Like I would
Mm,
love, honestly, I would love to see an organization. I've actually tested this in past organizations that we don't really have full recruiters. We actually have HR business partners operating as a recruiting team when needed, but then their HR business partners there for everything else because the hiring manager is doing so much of the legwork. So in fact, right now at Nectar, we don't have recruiters. We do put so much on our hiring managers and they rely on a recruiting resource center to get the help they need. So like we'll help you build your job descriptions, we'll help you get them posted, we'll help you sort through these candidates and source, but really it's on the hiring manager to be the one to manage this process because they're the ones that need the hire. So I think it can make recruiters indispensable, but that's where recruiters should be seen as more strategic, which is our next hot take. That's why we
Yeah.
change it to that direction, because if you have a recruiter that can be way more involved in the business, they're actually not just a recruiter, right? They're more operating like an HR business partner, which has a lot of value throughout the entire employee life cycle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm excited for us to dive into that hot take. So, I know that's our next and final one. Before we jump to it, I wanna unpack a little bit more on how recruiters can build stronger relationships. So, in terms of either relationships with the candidates themselves or the hiring managers or even the business on a broader scale. To become more of a strategic partner, there. So any thoughts on how recruiters can build stronger relationships?
Yeah, especially as we look at candidates, they want to hear from hiring managers. And the reason why is because there's like that really day-to-day connection. But what if recruiters could channel that? So when they're reaching out, they're actually sharing in a way that's very transparent and showing them that. And I think they can do that using my Create framework. I say mine, it's Nectar's, our company's Create framework. It's an acronym. We've talked about acronyms, and this is the one that I teased a little bit. So the acronym's Create, and it stands for communication, recognition, environment, alignment, trust, and elevation. And we believe at Nectar that these are the 6 aspects of creating a great culture. So if we look at an HR department, looking at everything we do in these 6 elements, if a recruiter can also look at everything they're doing within the same lens, they're going to bring people ready to be a part of this culture that we've created. So when we think about that, communication, we've already talked about if you can communicate very well, thoughtfully, respectfully, empathetically to candidates, you're going to create that really great connection right there with your candidates, with your hiring managers. Communication is crucial. Recognition, I mean, a thank you can go a long way, right? When you're dealing with all parties, like recognizing the effort put in is really crucial. I'm not going to go through all elements of this Create framework, but you can see how it can apply to building a great relationship, right? If you're building trust, if you're getting aligned and make sure you're in the same direction together, you're creating a great environment to be a part of. All of these things, you're elevating each other as the process goes, can really help you create a great process as you are bringing people into your company.
Yeah. You said you had a good acronym for me. I was not expecting that. That's top tier when it comes to acronyms. So, I love
I
that.
love it too because it's empowering, right? The word create,
Yeah.
like you have the power to create. You can go and make this recruiting process amazing by creating it.
Yeah. And it looks like the audience, could you repeat the acronym meaning for create?
Yes. So create communication, recognition. I have to spell it in my head as I'm reading it out loud. Environment, alignment, trust, elevation.
Awesome. Yeah. See, I think everyone agrees. That's a great acronym. And I loved how you dived into that a little bit. So recruiters with candidates, recruiters with hiring managers, and even the business can leverage that. That's awesome.
It's awesome.
All
If you
right.
need it more, reach out to me. I connect on LinkedIn. I can give you my whole Create framework in a nice PDF.
Oh, I love it. And we will have Cassidy's LinkedIn on the last slide, so you all can connect with her shortly after. All right, let's get to our last hot take of
The
today.
spiciest of the take.
Yes, just taking it up a notch here. So, obviously we talked about how recruiters can build better relationships. There's obviously a level of caring about business metrics, right? And company goals that further that relationship, an alignment, right? Can you kind of elaborate why that's so important, just with your experience, kind of some insight on why should recruiters care about business metrics and goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the recruiters do care about business metrics, but sometimes I don't think they care about the business metrics that the company cares about, which is why I think that they get this bad rap of not being a strategic partner because they're not focused on the metrics that create business outcomes. Which
Hmm.
is where I think there's just some misalignment there. Because I do think that there's recruiting teams that they just recruit, fill the seats, okay. And then there's teams like, let's track our metrics. Let's track time to fill. Let's track cost per hire. Let's track total source candidates and where they're getting sourced from and where our best leads are coming from and how many came from referrals and all this great data. But does that data actually impact our business outcomes? I'm not sure if your CEO is going to say our employee source report is directly translating to our turnover rate. Maybe it is, and it is like, please tie that together. But I think that's where recruiters could focus more on quality of hire or the candidate experience or retention. Like I would love to see retention be more of a KPI for recruiting teams. They don't just get people in the door, they want to make sure that they're maximizing their time there and they're not just turning around and leaving right away. And that's where they're seeing much more strategic partners when they're with it for the employee life cycle, not just from source to offer, the entire employee life cycle. Liv, have you heard, I think Greenhouse published it. It's called ELTV, Employee Lifetime Value. Again,
Yeah.
acronyms. We're loving acronyms over.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love bringing that chart up. It shows like when you go to hire someone, obviously there's a need. You're using resources, so you're going to dip below this line as you get your hire managers to help you step out of their day-to-day work and hire. Once you make a hire, then you have to train them up. So you have to go back to this line, and then finally they pass that line and they're contributing, and that's why we hired this person is to relieve, different workloads and take things off their plate. And then the chart continues to go up. How high can somebody, produce? And then it starts to level out and then it continues on. How long can we keep someone producing at that level? And then obviously at the end of the employee life cycle, it tapers off at the end and then they exit the company. But if you can look at recruiting from that scope of the entire employee life cycle and say, as a recruiter, how can I make sure that I'm tracking metrics that help this life cycle from how quickly we can get someone in, which is time to fill, important metric, but continue these important metrics. How quickly can they be onboarded? How quickly we can be producing to the level they need to? How much longer can we retain them because of what we can offer them, what they can offer us? And if recruiters could be more involved in those metrics, that's incredible. I would love to see that, which is why I think the recruiter role can play a lot of a business partner role as well. Like if they have that mindset of a true partner of the business, they will be very much aware of that full employee life cycle. I want to help maximize that.
Yeah, and so I'm curious because you mentioned a few different metrics that could be measured in audience. If you're comfortable with it, maybe put in the chat like what you measure.
I would love
And
to see that.
yeah, it would just be, I think, really insightful for
And what
everyone.
they measure that they think actually has a big outcome on the business. Which one are
Yeah,
they? I do think that you can tie a lot there. Some you can tie very strongly, and those are the ones that I think we need to focus on to really be seen as strategic partners.
right. Absolutely. And kind of on that note of alignment and metrics and business goals, we do have a question, and I missed this one, but I'm gonna bring it back up here. But um, how do you navigate hiring managers that expect TA to create and manage the entire recruitment onboarding process? So we kind of already talked about some of that potential tension, right, in timing and effort. But do you have any thoughts or feelings or suggestions when it comes to aligning your HRTA goals and then the hiring manager goal, and kind of bringing those two together, but also providing a handoff in a way, or roles and responsibilities?
One thing I would say is that if you're going to move this kind of process over to be really heavily involved with hiring managers, get your top leadership involved. It can be a company-wide top-down effort. You're going to get a lot more buy-in and a lot less pushback towards moving this change because it is requiring hiring managers to do some more work and not just put everything on the recruiter. But if you as a recruiter can step in and provide so much more value, hopefully that trade-off is there for them. They're willing to put in more work because they're getting a lot more from it. And what I mean by that is, as a recruiter, go and ask to join your hiring manager's team meetings. If you get a rec list, say, we know that a hiring manager wants to expand their team. We're going to bring on, let's pick on product. We're going to bring on 3 new product managers in the next 12 months. And we know that from the beginning of the year. Start joining your product managers teams right now and find out their inner workings and what the projects they're working on and how different personalities are coming together. So when you go to open this rec with this hiring manager, they're so hyped because they know that you know the business so well. You're ready to do this, to fill this role for them. You know how to figure out the pieces of this puzzle. And they're willing to put in the time to help make that happen because you put on this time to also make it the best for them. So that is like an ideal world. I know it's asking a lot of recruiters to join team meetings, but really, I mean, it's a great way to really get down to what's going to be successful. So you're not just going to go source, 300 candidates, let's interview 40 of them, let's, get down to 10, and we're just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. We're actually going to spend more time with the team and then go thoughtfully source, maybe only 40 candidates. And then we can get to our numbers quicker without just trying to throw everything at the wall to see what's going to come in. We actually spent the time to really be a partner in the business.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. All right. See, this is where I wish I was taking notes, but we're recording. So if anyone missed that in the beginning, we're recording and you'll have that available after today. Um, Cassie, we have a couple questions here, and then I've got one more question on this hot take, but I want to make sure we address some of what's from the audience. So Deborah is bringing up retention as a KPI for recruiters.
Yes.
Um, if retention is a KPI for recruiters, how do you calculate that? Once the candidate is hired and are moved to training in their department, how does a recruiter play a role in that? We've lost a lot during training for a variety of reasons. Some can be tied back to hire, but some are just related to training.
Yeah. Which is a great point to also then distinguish. So it sounds like they're tracking the reason for, parting ways. And if they're finding out that they are for hire, that's where that data piece, go and dive deeper. Let's get to first principles here. Ask why 7 times and figure out why this person left through the hiring process, what made them not a good fit. But the fact that they're already know these data points, they're already tracking it well. And it's a matter of not necessarily you tracking it as a recruiter, but you partnering with the team that's tracking this data. So make great friends with your HR business partners, the HR side of the house, whoever that is, and help them get the data if they're not already getting it, and then analyze it together and show that you want to be part of this business. You want to be that strategic partner. And obviously the data came out that some of it's through training, and hopefully the training person is now also empowered, like, let's fix it. What's happening in training to fix? Because they're watching you emulate. How can I take this data and then go back and try to counteract what's happening on my front end to not get that result?
Yeah. Yeah, really great question, Deborah. I'm sure a lot of the audience can relate to that. So glad you're tracking to Cassie's point. You've got the data. Now it's that alignment and analyzing it. Um, One more question here from Ashley. How would you appropriately address a candidate? Oh, so this is really interesting. And I'd be curious with like the hiring manager involved here, but how would you appropriately address a candidate who follows up on a resume or application? However, you've already reviewed their resume and application, do not think they are a qualified candidate for hire.
So have they already been given that message and then they follow up? I don't know if I can ask follow-up questions here, if you can answer back to that. I'm going to assume that's the case for now, but correct me if I'm
Okay.
wrong. But if you've already sent this automated message, I'm assuming it's automated. We don't have time to send, personal ones. Make your automation feel very friendly. And if they're following back up to ask probably for feedback, if they're a candidate that's made it to an in-person interview, I would suggest some feedback. Like, that's a very kind thing to do if you have the time for it. If there were like knockout questions and you can quickly just say, hey, like back to my Utah example, we need someone here in Utah, you're located in North Dakota, and then move on. And if they keep following up from there, like, cut this out conversation off. Just say like, I'm sorry, we don't have time to discuss this further. That's the reason why. Most candidates won't come back for that. They'll just come back once. But if they had any type of interview process at all, even just a little one sentence line can help them shut that door, right? They're trained to ask for feedback. Candidates are always trained to say, hey, go find out what happened. So
Mm,
it doesn't have to necessarily be about them. It can also be about you as a company. Like, hey, our company's looking for this and we didn't see that on your resume. Thanks so much for applying. We'll keep you in our candidate pool. And also mean it. Like do what you say you're gonna do. Just don't say nice fluffy things to them and you're not actually doing it. If you're not gonna keep them in the candidate pool, then don't say that. Like I really think it's important to be honest and trustworthy. But that would be my suggestion. If they come back and they've already been declined, just a quick one sentence response to make your employer brand really be awesome. Like if they were going to go write a review right now about their interview process, you want them to write a great review. So whatever that needs to be, it's going to be a different level of engagement for different types of candidates. But if that's your goal, I think that you'll make the right decision on what to say and what to do.
yeah. Really great question, especially if you're leveraging so many different solutions to recruit as well, and that influx of applications. Cassie, I'm watching the clock, so I'm gonna move us on a little bit, but just if you were to summarize, one or two next steps for our audience when it comes to becoming a strategic partner, what would those be? And then we'll kind of move on to one more topic.
Yeah, my one thing I would suggest is to really just think about how you could apply the Create framework, how you could make your recruiting process be a really great entry point for the company, and how can you partner with the people currently in the process that you don't think about. Your hiring managers partner better together, your HR teams, like where can you increase these partnerships to really be more involved and engaged on all the back end stuff and not just out sourcing, filling, getting people in the door. Do that legwork to make that next step even easier for you because you're just way more involved.
Love that. That's fantastic. So, Cassie, the last little, I just want to spend just a few minutes on this, but talking about aligning culture and talent for kind of long-term sustainable success, I would say. So we've talked a lot about how recruitment has been evolving, not just how we engage with candidates, but also how we align internally, right? Talent with broader goals and culture. But in your opinion, what is the most important takeaway for recruiters and hiring managers as they kind of step forward into alignment in this kind of new realm of recruitment?
Yeah, the most important, man, it's hard. I want to give like three. I'll try to give just
Right.
one. But I think if you can put yourself in the candidate's shoes, knowing where we're headed, knowing that these candidates are only becoming more tech savvy, more wanting flexibility, more wanting this purpose driven, put yourself in those shoes. What can you do to speak their language? What can you do to proactively be involved in the branding so that you're attracting these people to your org, so you're removing some of your legwork, and then proactively within your org, making those connections to, again, make it easier for hiring managers to do their job. Like you're just doing a little more legwork to be more ingrained in the whole process. That's the takeaway I hope people want to do is that recruiters are very crucial. We need recruiters, but we need recruiters that can operate as true business partners, not just these, harmful myths of seat fillers and not strategic and a dime a dozen. Like that's not what we want. We want the recruiters that are doing that long-term thinking, that strategic game plan, and be making orgs just like bring in the best talent because we have the best recruiters doing it.
I love that. Yeah. And I want to ask kind of a follow-up question on there. And then I want to make sure we give everyone time to get your LinkedIn and connect with you. Um, how how might our audience measure success here, right? So they leave this webinar and they've got new acronyms to think on, and how might they best measure success or communicate what success looks like to other leaders?
Yeah. My one thing that I always tell people when they're trying to measure success, you need a benchmark where you're at today. Before you change anything, get a benchmark. Otherwise, it's hard to measure, right? It's hard to be like, hey, we increased by, I'm actually not sure because we don't know where we started, right? You need to first benchmark. So step one would be like, let's benchmark let's do candidate surveys and find out what our candidates think about the process. Let's interview our hiring managers. What do they think about the process? Let's interview all of our stakeholders, whatever needs to be to collect data as a benchmark. And then whatever metrics they determine are right for their business to track that are really those end outcomes, like retention should be one of them. Where are we at today? Then start implementing these changes and adapting to the new ways that people are expecting recruiting to happen. And then come back and you can measure again and you'll see that marked improvement.
I love that. I love that. And we kind of talked about that on a previous HR at the Table webinar. One of our speakers said, um, it's okay. Step one is awareness of where you're at.
Yes, yes. If
Okay.
you get horrible results on your benchmarking, that's the point. You're there to go and fix them and there to go and make things even better. So I love that. That yes, don't be alarmed. You're like, crap, we're not doing very good here. It's like that's fine. That's why you're there to make it better.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna pull this up so everyone can scan and connect with you, Cassidy. But kind of as we're wrapping up, if you were to give like one, I mean, I always say this, but then I'm like, oh, I rewatch it and like I have, so many thoughts and so many notes and so many takeaways. But if you were to kind of pick one thing or leave our audience with one kind of golden nugget, what would that be?
I don't know if I want to leave a golden nugget. I actually would love to leave a little bit of gratitude. If you're a recruiter watching this, thank you for doing the role that you're doing. Like it can go unnoticed. It can be, you're getting the brunt of things often. You're having to tell a lot of people no, which is hard. You get to tell, a few people yes, but you don't get to tell everyone yes. So I just wanted to leave all the recruiters that are watching, like, thank you. I think that you guys can be awesome people. And these hot takes were just, the hot takes not to be harmful in any way, just to be like, I think that really there's a way to level up recruiters. But just wanted to share some gratitude for all the recruiters out there.
Oh, I love that. And I will second that. And just thank everyone for what they do and their commitment to people. It shows and it goes a long way. So we've got contact information here for Cassie if you want to scan and leave a QR code. We've also, again, this episode was sponsored by our friends and good partner, Lever by Employ. So for those of you that mentioned you're looking for a solution, highly recommend Lever and the Employ brand. So definitely explore them. And then if you'd like to get in touch with Verified First. But we've got Sherman HRCI codes coming up, so I'm just gonna leave this for a second and then we'll share that. But Cassie, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for your time.
Oh, the time flew by.
Yeah, I know. We could have talked for a while, I'm sure, if we didn't have a limit, we would have kept going. To our audience, I'd love any feedback. We have a survey we'll launch shortly after the event. So as soon as you guys get your Sherman HRCI, I'm going to close it down. Please give us any feedback. If there are hot takes that you have that maybe we should discuss, maybe they're spicier than the ones we covered today or not. Would love to hear those, as well as what you thought of today's episode. We, again, just going back to the heart of HR at the Table, it is to be a resource. It's to be educational, insightful, and helpful to you all, because you're all doing amazing stuff. So again, would appreciate just 30 seconds of your time for that survey, and then we'll be all set. Cassie, thank you, thank you, thank you. We
You're
really
so
appreciate it.
welcome. Can't wait till the next one.
Right? Yeah, we've got season 5 right around the corner. So um
Again.
I we'll have our last HR at the Table next month, December 17th, I believe, third Tuesday of the month, and then we'll start season 5. And Cassie, we just might have to have you back for that one. So
Thanks, everyone.
all right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.